And here we are again, live from beautiful planet Earth, bringing you Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle. Tonight we are broadcasting from somewhere in the deep deserts of Southern California. That Pueblo de Los Angeles place. Something like that. Yeah. And here we are.
Yep. I'm Noor Kyle, and this is
Mushtaq Ali. And we are here to entertain you and amuse you and confuse you and do all of those things that we like to do. We will have, I don't think we need to pin it, but it's not popping back and forth.
Yeah.
It's odd.
Let's just do it and then undo
we'll do it and then undo it. There we are. That way people know who the hell we are. Or we know who we are. You can see that it's me that's talking.
What would you like to do?
Can it? Yeah, there we go. So, tonight we are going to be talking about the way of the householder and relationship as a spiritual tool. It seems like there should be like a flourish of trumpets for that. So this is of course a term that I think we stole it from either Hinduism or Buddhism. The idea of a householder being somebody who lives a normal life, raises a family, works a job, tills the fields, moves the cows in and out of their sheds, all of that kind of stuff. As opposed to the way of the monk, which is go off into a monastery and beg for your food and do all of that kind of stuff. Now, in Sufi thought, the way of the monk is not considered a very high path. It is like it's not well thought of. The idea of complete withdrawal from the world forever. And instead, the most emphasis was what was put on the way of the householder, and that as practice.
Being in the world.
Being in the world.
Yep. As opposed to,
retreat from the world.
Retreat, yep.
Now, I will say that doing the spiritual discipline of a householder is inherently more difficult than doing the path of the monk, because you have to deal with all of these real world considerations. If you have a family, your family has a certain set of rights over you. Your kids have some rights over you. Your spouse has some rights over you that you must respect. And if you don't respect them, then you're not on the path, if that makes sense. When Siddhartha Gautama abandoned his wife and children to go off and seek enlightenment, it would be a Sufi point of view that was what set him back and made him take years to find what he was looking for or decades to find what he was looking for rather than a couple of years. I'm going to have all the Buddhists sending me hate mail over that one. Yeah. Oh well. So, the way of the householder is to make everything that you do as part of your life in the world part of your spiritual practice. Driving to work should be part of your spiritual practice. And there's a lot to be said for that. My old Silat teacher said to me one day, You know why I never get upset when I'm stuck in traffic? And he was living in Los Angeles, and
So
every,
there's definitely something to be said about that. Yeah.
he said, when I am stuck in traffic, I sit behind the wheel and I imagine myself going through my forms, my jurus. And I just do that over and over again until it's time to move the car. And then not only am I never upset, but my CLAC gets better. So that is one example of the practice of the way of the householder. When you have to go out into the world, you incorporate that with your practice. We do it, we start people doing that through the breathing practice.
Because that's something you can do all the time, anytime.
Yep. Sitting in your car, walking down the street, talking with people, virtually anytime you need to do it, because it doesn't distract you from the now. It actually helps you focus in the real world. So, that's pretty much the first thing. Now, the most important thing, now I need to predicate this by saying that there is absolutely a valid path for people who choose not to be in relationship. This is something that I've had arguments with some other people who think that you must have a relationship in order to be fully, wholly healthy. And I disagree with that. I think that you can reach the heights of enlightenment whether you are bonded with somebody else or not. That being said, I find that there is nothing more conducive to personal growth than two people, or two or more people, who are working their relationships as a spiritual practice. And what might that look like, Ms. Kyle?
Well, I think it looks like, I mean, we talk a lot about equity in relationships and things like that, but this goes beyond that to the point where there's a pursuit of shared growth. You're supporting each other in your spiritual and emotional growth. And the way that's done is that you put, how would we put that? Like, you're putting the growth ahead of comfort in certain ways.
Yeah. In most ways, because in order to grow with another person, it requires that you confront oftentimes uncomfortable things about yourself. Occasionally uncomfortable things about them, mostly about yourself. And it's hard, but it is more valuable than, I've known a number of people who have been in relationships where one person is really into their own growth and self-development, and their partner wants to watch football or do whatever it is that one does, and had no interest. And most of those marriages or relationships did not last all that long. I mean, 5 years, 6 years, but there was something lacking in my estimation. Whereas one of my early mentors, who I first met when he was in his mid-80s, he and his wife had been together for like 69 years or something ridiculous. They got married quite young. And they had been together their whole lives, and they both had their spiritual paths. And it was interesting because they were very different paths, but they spent time every day sharing what they had learned in their own journeys with each other. And he told me that that was one of the reasons that they had managed to stay together and have a happy marriage for all those decades, is because of that one thing, that they constantly shared their own learnings with each other. Even though their paths were radically different in a lot of ways.
How so?
Well, he was a Mason. His entire spirituality as a formal practice revolved around the degrees of Masonry and all of the symbolic stuff, and he took it very, very seriously. And she was part of Yogananda's group. She was an actual direct student of Yogananda's back in the day. And so they kind of diverged along those lines, but he said that they found that sharing how they did things and the realizations that they had somehow made their experience more whole, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that within a relationship that is devoted to your development, to your own awakening, that one of the essential things is that each person in that relationship communicate what they're learning with the other people, and sometimes getting help about what they're learning from the other people. And that's I don't see that as much as I would like to in the world. And it would be useful to see more.
Any questions thus far? Any thoughts to share? Oh, Ms. Takin's here.
Ah, good.
Hi, Ms. Takin. Okay.
Okay, no questions?
Nope, not yet. How is this all a feeling for you guys to hear? Thinking about the sharing of growth and things like that within intimate relationships. I might start calling on you guys.
Look out. You can't call on Mr. King because he just got here.
No. David, what are your thoughts?
Having one dedicated thing that the two people do every day or very frequently makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, one of the, when you're talking about a couple, one of the classic practices that I can highly recommend is called the gratitude practice, where every day each person shares with the other 3 things that they're grateful for. Just helps keep you focused. Nothing terribly profound about it, but I can tell you that it has a tendency to change the way people interact.
You can also open up an avenue for deeper conversation too, I would imagine.
Yep.
Yep.
So, one of the great practices, one of the big practices that one does in relationship, and I don't want to just talk about relationship,
Right.
because the way of the householder is not just marriage and family and that sort of thing. It's living in the world. And marriage and family can be part of that, but the practice of having a relationship is one of the biggest and most important parts of this.
Though not required.
Though not required.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's important to remind people of that. But
yeah, and if you find yourself not wanting to be in a relationship, contrary to what some people say, this does not mean that there is something in you that's broken.
yeah. On the other hand,
like Mr. Gurdjieff says, if you want to grow fast, grow in relationship with somebody.
Or somebody's.
Or somebody's, yes.
It's not always one person. As long as it's a conscious relating, sometimes it's multiple people. But again, that just means in some ways more work, more avenues for learning.
In all ways, more work.
I'm always conservative about these things.
Exponentially so, as far as I can tell. So one of the highly recommended practices is listen to your partner as if they were speaking with the spirit of the divine when you are talking about spiritual things. Not necessarily talking about the grocery list, but when you are discussing your work together, or your work and their work, imagine that the spirit of the divine is going to speak through them and listen to them in that way. That's often very, very hard.
Yes. Discipline. Yeah. Patience.
Yes. Getting your ego out of the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, that being said, in general, if you are doing a householder, you need to find a way to view your employment as a form of service. Does that make sense? I know I need to say more about that, but so let's say, for instance, Zainab. Zainab is a carpet merchant and an artist. Now, as a carpet merchant, she could just sell rugs. Or she could sell rugs as if each of those rugs were a blessing that she was bringing to some person who had been guided into her shop. And anybody who knows anything about Middle Eastern carpets and carpet merchants knows that, and I pointed this out before, every good mystical story starts with an encounter with a carpet merchant. It's true. My old buddy Rashad Field, he starts out his first book talking about being in London and just kind of randomly wandering into this carpet shop that he had never seen before, and he meets a guy who is a sheikh in the tradition of Ibn al-Arabi, who was selling carpets in the shop, and he, over a course of several discussions, guides Rashad to Konya, Turkey, where he meets his teacher. That is a story trope that happens a lot. So And if that happens, the reason that it happens is because the carpet merchant is treating those carpets as if they were gifts of divine spirit that they are bringing to all and sundry. Is that a lot to take on, Zainab?
No, since our talks and the way that I've been looking at it has changed, I can see how the right people come for the right rug, and
Yeah.
That kind of makes it more fun too, huh?
Yep. And every day the place gets more magical. There will probably come a time where people come to your shop not just to buy carpets, but to sit on them and listen to you talk. I predict this.
already a little bit happening at the markets. Some people just come to hang out and talk about the rugs.
Yeah. So, thoughts so far? No thoughts. Such a quiet group to me.
So let's say more about using one's money-making occupation as a way to be, you know, to give kindness to the world, let's say.
Yeah. Okay, say more about that.
Well, I mean, God, I mean, obviously the work that we do is always intended to be along those lines. Like when we do one-on-one sessions with clients and stuff, it's really not about the dollar signs. It's about connecting with the people who are genuinely going to benefit from working with us. And I think that that's the way that I prefer to pursue an occupation, is to make sure it's always going to create a connection in some way. It's not all about the bottom line. And that helps me stay grounded. And it feeds me, you know, not only in terms of literal food, but spiritually as well.
Yeah, and that's an important thing. And no matter what your job is, you can find a way to make it more of a connection with your own work, with your own path.
Yeah, because it's not always going to be about connecting with other people either.
Yeah. But even if you're a code monkey, right, and you're sitting there and you're hacking out code to make some app for iPhones or something, if you do it with the intention of making something that will increase the goodness in the world, it's going to have its effect.
Living your ethics too.
Yeah.
That's relevant.
So in home life, we find that there are certain areas that are very, very important, one of which is cooking, preparing meals. I tend to view the preparation of food as a practice that draws people together. Whether you are doing group preparation or one person is cooking for several others. And the bottom line is whatever you do it with full intention. You do it with as much awakeness as you can.
Dishes.
Dishes.
Dishes are meditative for me. Yep. Dishwashing specifically. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So anybody got any other ideas on things that you could do in your daily life that could be turned into part of your practice?
Nancy, what are you thinking about?
Well, the thing that occurred to me for daily practice would be seeing if I can apply this to choosing books to get rid of. Because I'm really swamped with books, and there's a lot that I cannot reasonably expect to read again, or use for reference, or anything.
Yeah. Share the wealth, Nancy.
Right, yeah. And one thing I was thinking about on the business front, this was back when my business was a lot busier. And occasionally I think I did the right thing by not selling. Because once in a while, somebody would say that they wanted to spend their rent money on my buttons.
Yeah.
And I would say, come back when you have money.
That's a good move.
Yeah, that is a very good move. That is an example of exactly what we're talking about.
I mean, I was flattered, but...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And yet, you knew that that wasn't going to be good for them.
Yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, maybe some of them were engaging in hyperbole, but at that point I just reacted literally.
Better to be on the safe side, I would think, you know. The intention is good.
Yeah.
Mustaqim, what do you think? Yes, you. You're a householder.
Yeah, you put on the spot, perhaps.
Yeah, I do that to people.
You and me both. I'll do it.
So, but that brings up something important. Children. Part of the practice of being a householder is if you have children, your life must be a demonstration of the path for them. And I am told that this is the hardest part of everything. Just to be clear too, as far as I'm concerned, being on the path of the householder does not require you to have children. Some people used to say that it did, and I don't believe that this is the case. But if you do have them, then part of your duty to them, part of the rights that they have over you, is they have the right to learn from you. And so being conscious of the fact that whatever it is that you're teaching, they're learning.
Good or bad.
Good or bad.
You're always watching and absorbing what they see.
And this is one of those little irritants that helps keep you conscious. Because if you are in a bad mood and you walk into the house and there is your son or daughter sitting there, or your son and daughter sitting there, and you're about to get all grumpy, and you stop and you think, whatever it is I do, they're going to think is correct. And that puts you in an interesting spot. course, then they will get to be teenagers, and then whatever it is that you do will be incorrect, but that's different. Just tired and crunchy.
Yeah, Zainab, I know you and I have talked a bit about setting an example for children through taking good care of yourself and doing, you know, whatever practices need to be done to center yourself in order to provide that sense of groundedness for your kids. So that's part of it. Yeah.
I found it's the hardest practice.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And especially that the sides, the deeper sides of you come out as well. So.
Yes.
Do you want to say any more about that? You don't have to give a specific story. I'm just curious.
Yeah, I'm just actually by time I see that the very inside of myself, it comes out as dealing with kids. Whereas you might be with your friend or your parents, there's still outer layers, but with kids it's the inner layer that they actually trigger those points in. It could be good or bad. It could be like it could be the joy or the anger or anything could come up.
Right.
So being present at that moment needs a quite lot of grounding and being conscious of it. That
definitely. Thank you for sharing that, because that's exactly what we're talking about. Yeah. That's what makes this so hard, is that you're not sitting in a cell with your own thoughts as your wall to bounce off of. You have your job, you have your relatives, you have your kids, you have your partner or partners, you have your pets, you have your house that you need to take care of, or apartment, whatever. A yard perhaps to be mowed, a car that keeps crapping out on you. And through all this, you're coming up with all these challenges that are going to be growth opportunities, or not. It's really one of the things that we have to struggle with. And that's what we talk about when we're talking about the irritant that helps us grow.
it's the battlefield, actually. I found you do the practices, when you're with kids, it's the battlefield. It's like now you go and you see if you really have done it correctly.
Right, yeah.
Yep. Kids also help you get rid of your ego, because the fact of the matter is, children must come first. They must come before you. It's not you and then the kids. It's not you and your partner and then the kids. For as long as they are children, and that, I suppose, varies from place to place to a certain extent, but you are responsible for them. And that responsibility comes before all other responsibilities. And that means that you have to learn to set your own ego aside sometimes. Sometimes that works better than others. This is also true in your relationship with your significant other. And that means that when you are dealing with them, you must regard them on an equal level with you. You don't have to put them in front of you, but you cannot put them behind you. You cannot say, my needs are more important than yours. It has to be, and this again becomes part of a serious spiritual practice, because we all know that our needs are important than everybody else's, right? We take that as a given pretty much, that my needs are the most important and I got to get those met. But if you are in a truly meaningful spiritual relationship, your needs are not more important than your partner's needs. And this causes a practice called compromise to have to happen on a regular basis. What compromise is on the spiritual practice level is creating a situation where everybody gets what they need, though nobody gets what they want. I'm being slightly facetious there, but only slightly. So any thoughts on this so far?
Mr. Kim says, what about teaching the kids some of the basic work?
Yes. I think that insofar as, okay, this is how I see it having been done and it having worked well. You begin teaching the children basic work from the time that you can communicate with them. And that's like, you know, Johnny is upset. Johnny, I want you to breathe like I'm breathing. Come on, let's make this a game. Let's see if you can, you know, hold your paws as long as I hold my paws. That sort of thing. Jeez.
Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm gonna shush my phone.
Speaking of householder things, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so breath work.
So,
children.
yeah, you start teaching your children that. Then at a certain point, the child has to make a choice to continue to learn. And that is often difficult for a parent, because children like to rebel at certain stages of their lives. You know, most of the children of hippies became Republicans. Most of the children of Republicans are becoming hippies. Rebellion. But yeah, you definitely, where better for a child to learn the practices than from their parents who are demonstrating them daily. And that's the big thing. If you demonstrate something daily, that's what your children will learn. Anything that you demonstrate daily, your children will learn.
Probably without even needing to.
Yeah.
Yeah, just absorbing.
Yeah, if you're grumpy and grouchy all day and you're yelling at people, that's what your children learn. If you are self-aware and reflective and try and live a conscious life and address reality as it is, that's what your children learn. Did that answer your question, Mr. Kim?
Yes.
Good.
Travis, I'm curious, what's on your mind?
I don't know. A lot of chaos here in the background.
Oh, really?
Second. But yeah, I mean, you know, well, I've got little kids that are a lot of the chaos going on. So, you know,
Yeah.
this is a really interesting part for me. And yeah, I don't know. I think we covered a lot of it, you know, about how the they'll absorb what they see, you know, regardless of whether that's what you're trying to communicate to them or not. And then especially, you know, when the younger they are, the more, you know, they're just a mirror, you know, because I mean, at some point, like, I mean, the kid barely, I mean, they have their own thoughts and feelings, but they're not necessarily communicating them to you. You know, what you're feeling based on them is, you know, it's a reflection of you and your mood and how you're approaching the world, you know, because I mean, a 2-year-old, I mean, if they're crying because they're hungry, they're purely crying because they're hungry. It's not an emotional issue for them in the same way it is for an adult. You know? So it's really interesting to see when you start getting frustrated with that, you know, it's like, well, why am I frustrated? All the kid wants is food, you know, it's not about you, you know, and we're used to, well, we tend to perceive the things going on in the world in how they relate to us. And it's a good reminder that a lot of what's going on in the world is not in relation to you. Even the people you're talking to, they're responding to whatever's going on in their head, you know?
Yep.
Very, very little of it is actually you. And kids are just a great mirror for seeing that, you know, in my experience.
It sounds exactly right to me.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Travis, because I mean, that's part of what we're trying to get at here, is that so often our reactions to other people reflect what's going on inside of us rather than necessarily anything about them.
Right.
Yeah. And with children, sure, young children especially, so yeah. So,
Cool.
So, in the formal practice of our karika, we take the 9 precepts. For those of you who don't know what they are, go to our YouTube channel, look in the playlists, and you'll find the playlist for the 9 precepts. And listen to them all because they're really good. And they are some of the most profound teachings I've ever run across. And I don't say that because it's my job to say that. It is my job to say that. What am I saying? But each of those is designed to be done in the context of daily life, not in the context of a monastery. I mean, yes, we all want to find the Saramun Monastery high up in the mountains of Afghanistan, but it ain't there anymore. You can't go there and find it. It went away a long time ago. And so you are not going to find that monastery and go and learn the sacred dances and all of this kind of stuff. If you want to learn what the Saramun were teaching, you take those 9 precepts and you integrate. Remember, the first precept, it's watch your breath. Breathe consciously. If you do nothing else in your entire life but that one practice, it will change everything for you. And that can be done throughout every day of your life without interfering with anything.
yeah.
You do not need extra time to do that practice. Hoshtardam, watch your breath, breathe consciously, awareness of breath, is something that is integrated into your every action. Yes, you can take formal time to sit and do the breath practices that we teach, but virtually every breath practice we teach is designed to be done while you are living your life. The second step, Nazar Bhartanam, watch your step. Know where you're going. Pay attention to the quality of your actions and allow them to show you where they will take you. And if you don't like where that action will take you, don't take the action. Take only the actions that further your path. And This is incredibly important because we are not creatures of the moment only. We have the ability to bind time. We have the ability to project our behavior into the future. And this, it is argued, is one of the things that makes us truly human. And it's one of our oldest skills. This is one of the skills when we were becoming Homo sapiens. This was one of the skills we developed. You can see it in use today if you find, say, San Bushmen who still know how to do persistence hunting. Persistence hunting is where you run down your prey. Think about that. You're going to chase down an antelope. This is not something that you can just go out and do. If you just go out and try and chase an antelope, that antelope is going to lead you everywhere and drop you in a ditch. So if you watch the sand people when they hunt this way, they actually go into a kind of trance where they become their prey as they're tracking it. And even when they don't see the visible trail left by the animal, they can extrapolate where the animal must have gone from the data that they have right now. This is something that we may be the only creature on the planet that can do this. This ability to project our thoughts into the future and determine what the path most likely should be. And this is what is embodied in the second teaching of watch your step. Now, I'm not going to go through all 9 because you can go and listen to them, and we have everything in great detail, but I want you to get the idea that the practices that we teach you are designed to be done not in a monastery, but in your living room or in your rug shop or at your college
Or at the bus stop.
or at the private playground with the kids. All of these things. And in your primary relationship or relationships, each of these practices come into play as well. Starting with watch your breath. Now imagine if you were talking with your partner, and as you were listening to them, you were in your breath practice. You were just there, you were being present, and you were literally just listening to what they were saying while being aware of your own breath, while doing your practice, while maintaining the control pause. Imagine how that might change everything, because you wouldn't be thinking about, how am I going to respond to this? Wait a minute, what did they say? Was that an insult? Are they putting me down? Any of that kind of stuff. You're just there and you're just listening. And then when you speak, you go into the second one. You go into the watch your step. And trust me, watching your step when you're talking to your beloved is not a bad thing. Know where your words will take you. Do not speak unconsciously. Do not speak from reaction. Allow yourself to be thoughtful and present in your speech. And again, each of these 9 precepts completely relates to how you relate to the other, especially when the other is a significant other.
And it may not always be things that are enjoyable to hear that you're saying, but if you're conscious when you say them, then you already know that. You know how to express those things in a way that is going to land more, kindly or more clearly or more tolerably with your partner.
And this does not necessarily have to just relate to romantic partners.
That's true.
It
Yeah.
relates to friends, to business partners. Kyle and I use this all the time when we are working on the business of the nine-sided circle.
Yep.
And it makes for much, much smoother getting stuff done, in my experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier to say things when I know that we are listening to each other in a productive way, and we're not waiting for the blows if we have something negative to say. Or it's not even usually something negative because we know how to frame it in a way that feels safe for one another. Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm talking about something that I think is not good, I'm not talking about, Kyle, you're not good, you did this.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm going to be talking purely about the behavior and not the person. And this is all rookie stuff at a certain level.
Yeah. But I find we're also out of practice, that it's good to have these reminders.
Yep. So, thoughts or questions before we go on? We got about 10 minutes before I'm going to wrap up, unless Kyle wraps up before I do. And that's another part of the relationships thing. There is only one kind of relationship that works in the world.
Oh.
Somebody
Okay,
said,
take care, Travis. Travis has to go.
oh,
sorry about that.
Take care.
Hope to see you again. Thanks for coming through.
Yeah.
All right, so
there is only one kind of relationship that works in the world, and that is the horizontal relationship. This idea of the man is the head of the household, the entire quiverful thing, y'all know what that is, the fundamentalist Christian women as slightly dolled up slaves, basically. Yeah, they would not say it that way, but I will. The whole Abrahamic thing of women are less than does not work for having a true work relationship, does not work for having a spiritual relationship, does not work for having a relationship where the people develop. And it doesn't matter whether you are on the I am better than you, I am less than you side of it. If you are in that kind of relationship, it will stop your growth for both of you. The only relationship that will allow for true spiritual growth is the one where each member of that relationship is absolutely co-equal with the other.
and that takes work sometimes.
That takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about this before, why that is. And I will tell you that, again, that one of the basic reasons that that is the way it is because you cannot tell the truth in a relationship that is not absolutely equal. Because whoever is on the bottom is going to be saying what they want, what they think the one on the top wants to hear. And the one on the top is never going to be acting from an actual true feedback to their behavior.
And we've talked about this in business, in intimate relationships,
In politics.
yeah, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, in politics, this is the classic, the emperor has no clothes. The emperor is naked, but nobody is going to tell him because he's the emperor.
So how about retreat?
How about retreat? Retreat is something that everybody should do from time to time. And the retreat can be anywhere from a day to 40 days. Traditionally, the longest retreat that we do is 40 days. And that happens rarely. Retreat is we call it chalwat, and it is a withdrawal from everyday life so that you can deeply focus on aspects of your practice. But if you stay there, it doesn't do you any good. You have to take it back into the world, which is where you get the fourth precept, which is chalwat baranjuman, solitude, retreat, while within the crowd, within the world. To be inwardly with your practice while outwardly doing all of the things that you need to do.
That means not using, well, in part, it means not using the retreat as an excuse to ignore the rights that your family has over you,
Yes.
that your body has over
you. Yep. And that goes all the way back to the teachings of the Prophet, which is the source of all Sufism. And I love telling this story because I have never heard it better. And there was a particular companion of the Prophet who had given himself over to devotion and fasting and all manner of ascetic practices, to the point where that was all he was doing. And his wife came and complained to the Prophet saying, "We have no food in the house. My clothes are falling apart. The children have to run around half naked because my husband is not providing for us anymore." And the Prophet called his companion in and said, "Your family has rights over you, and your body has rights over you. You must attend to those before you attend to your practice. Otherwise, God is not going to accept your prayers." It's sort of like the spiritual equivalent of alimony and child support. Yeah, the divine reality will not be happy with you if you neglect your caring for the other, especially when the other is your spouse or spouses or your kids or your pets.
And the irony there is you're not neglecting your spiritual work by continuing to participate in daily life, as we've said. So even though this allegorical story is about, putting spirituality third after bodily well-being and family, the reality is all of those things are happening at the same time.
Exactly right.
But sometimes we need to couch it in that way so that people understand why these things are so important. And retreat can feel really good. And often, when we use retreats the right way, we can get a lot out of them.
Yeah. You can retreat for 8 hours once a week and get great benefit out of it.
But it always has to have its place within a larger ecosystem of activities.
Yeah, and if the rest of your life falls apart while you're on retreat, it wasn't really a retreat.
Nope.
So, thoughts and questions?
Oh, here's one about household tasks, which is occasionally I need to kill a mouse. And I just find it upsetting.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read the Bhagavad Gita for that.
Do you want to elaborate with it?
Yes. So, Arjuna is in his chariot and he's in front of the army, and he's facing off the other army, and they're about to have this big battle, and the other army is all of his relatives. I mean, it's his family on both sides. And he breaks down. He can't do it. He doesn't want to go out and fight members of his own family. He doesn't want to hurt them. He doesn't want to kill them. And he's paralyzed. And this is the famous part of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna, who is his charioteer of all things, basically teaches him the entire art of yoga. And there's a few little parts. And one part is where Krishna says to Arjuna, I have come, because Krishna is the divine reality embodied, right? He says, I have come as death. And whether you raise your bow or not, these people will not leave the field alive. Your job is to just do without being attached to the fruits of your doing. Now, I know this works because it was at one point in my life my job to kill the woodchucks that I would trap who were trying to destroy our garden. And, you know, woodchucks are like, they're as big as small dogs. They're something that is significant to kill them. And I have nothing in general against woodchucks. And yet, I had come as death. And they were doomed to that. And sometimes the mouse's number is up. The woodchuck's number is up. You are just the vehicle by which the universe dispatches them. I don't know if that helps you. That's what helped me to off a whole bunch of woodchucks. I remember one summer I killed 8 of them in 3 months.
That's right.
It's something I will try the next time I am dealing with a mouse.
Yeah, just remind yourself that you are just being the agent of fate. And it's nothing personal. The big thing is to act without attachment to the fruits of your action.
What would that mean in this context?
In this context, that just means being present, realizing that the mouse's time is up. And are you just using traps to kill them?
No, the situation is that sometimes the cat will put a live mouse in the bathtub and forget about it and wander off, and then the mouse can escape.
Yeah.
And so I have to deal with the mouse, and I sort of put a bunch of toilet paper between it and my hand, and I throw it in the toilet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
It's
true.
a bit more personal, you know, it is hands-on.
Yeah, and that's always harder. I determined that the quickest way to kill a woodchuck was with a spear thrust through the back of its neck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's quicker than beating it in the head with a hammer or drowning it or anything. But that means you have to be really intentional about the fact that you are about to drive a spear through the back of this woodchuck's neck.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm emotionally up for doing it that way, and it's not like the throwing it in the toilet is an especially slow death.
No, it's a fairly quick death. And yeah, I don't recommend spearing a mouse in the back of the neck. You don't have a spear that small.
Right. It would take even more skill than spearing the woodchuck.
Yeah.
I had in my 2 apartments ago, we had a mouse infestation, and my roommates wanted to use glue traps, which I refused to allow. I would hear them, and then I would take cooking oil, and I would take a Q-tip, and I would literally get them out of the sticky trap because that was unacceptable for me. But then
That's horrible, yeah.
it's awful, and they get so upset. the mice do.
Yes.
I was not going to stand for that. What we did instead was, you know, we got some really good quality snap traps, which are also a sucky way to go, but it's a lot faster. And we made sure that if we heard them struggling, I mean, I hope this is okay, Sharon. I think it's important for us to be straightforward here. I would put them in a brown bag and stomp on them because I knew that I didn't want them to suffer. And it was tough. There were some really uncomfortable moments, but I feel like in that scenario, it was very much like they've overstepped their bounds at that point. And so I'm just kind of establishing equilibrium again.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm sure there's such a thing as appropriate boundaries. I had one unnerving experience where I had been doing meditation and I also had a grain moth infestation. And until I figured out, you know, the place just had to be fogged.
Yeah.
I was hand smashing them,
Yeah.
which is normally a fairly neutral experience. But one time I did it right after I was meditating and I was really shaken.
Yeah.
Now, maybe it was a very special moth. I don't know, but
Yeah, you might have offed a Buddha of moths.
Don't say that.
Well, that's okay. I mean, that happens. I mean, think about how Krishna died, right? Krishna does all of this stuff on Earth, and he's done. So he goes for a walk in the woods. And he lays down under a tree, and a hunter comes by and shoots him with an arrow because he mistook him for a deer.
Yeah.
And Krishna's gone. Of course, he's not really gone.
And that moth isn't either.
And the moth isn't either. Yes.
lives in my memory.
Yeah. But what it is when you're conscious of what you're doing, you realize that you're doing something significant. You know, children step on bugs without thinking about them. An adult human being realizes that they are taking a life. They're ending something. And there's no way around that. And that, again, is part of the practice. It's like, it is kind of a shame that we no longer kill our own meat in most of the world. Because I think it would, there would be a lot more vegetarians probably, but it would be a more conscious way of eating meat to consciously take the life of the animal who is going to become your food.
Yeah, you know, I was thinking about, you know, there's the idea of you have gratitude to the animal you kill for meat, but I don't see how that model fits when you're just killing an animal because it's vermin.
Well, I mean, my strategy is in a way, I treat that creature as equal in value to me, which doesn't mean that I don't still follow through on my task, but at the same time, in a way, I'm apologetic to it.
Yeah. And no animal is vermin. Yeah, the mouse is doing mouse things. The mouse is doing what it's supposed to do as a mouse. And if the mouse were 6 feet tall and you were a tiny little thing, the mouse would be eating you. No doubt about that. But just as the mouse is doing mouse things, you are doing human things.
Right.
One of the human things is to protect your stuff from the mouse. That doesn't make the mouse vermin, and it doesn't make you bad. It's just part of the balance of things. And if anybody starts singing Circle of Life, I'm going to mute you.
Yeah. I mean, there's a saying in Islam, from God we come and to God we return. And I always think that whenever I have to do things like kill a mouse or deal with an ant infestation, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and there's the one about the man who was praying to be safe from lions.
Oh, yeah.
And the comment is something like, Allah also takes care of the lions.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a famous old Sufi story. Yeah, remember when you were alone praying for safety in the desert that God must also answer the prayer of lions.
So I hope something in there you can find, resolution in.
Yeah, it's just a difficult thing. It's not like it's making me crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the philosophical things that can really bring up a lot of deeper things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing about that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're welcome.
House. Yeah.
So that's pretty much it. We would like you to consider that the way of the householder, the way of being in the world and doing your practice is a valid, not just a valid, but a valid and extremely effective form of spiritual practice. And in some ways, according to some of us, it is superior to the way of the monk. Just a thought. And within that, being in relationship is going to be the heart of that practice for a lot of people.
Not everyone.
Not everyone,
But a lot of people.
but a lot of people. So that's all I got. Oh yeah, for whoever's listening out there, commercial time. It is a new month. We have put out our call for alms so we can keep this stuff going. We haven't decided what the new talk is going to be, the secret talk with Lady North.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't picked the topic for that yet, but we will announce it as soon as we figure out what it is. We are going to be videoing the talk for the Enneagram of groups within the next couple of days, and then have that up very shortly. And so, alms for the poor. You can find the links on the Nine-Sided Circle forum.
Yep.
And all the other stuff. Give us some commercial stuff.
Well, let's see. For the alms for this month, we're going to be raffling off that book by J.G. Bennett.
J.G. Bennett, yes.
What's
the
the title?
Sevenfold Work.
Yes. So, if that moves you, awesome. If not, cool. But either way, anyone who donates gets their name in the pot for that this month as well. Other than that, I can't think of anything right now.
Nope, that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, we are still up for doing private consultations.
Right.
We still have our. We're like an old trading post out in the Southwest. We always have a special, and that is you get to talk with us for half price for 6 weeks to see if we're any good at this talking thing.
6 sessions, $300.
Yep.
Yep.
So you got that going for you. That's our commercials, and we are all done. And with that, we are going to stop the recording.
All right. Take care.